There's there's no such thing as perfect, to be honest, and people who strive to be perfect in the way to be really perfect, they just are decisive. They cannot say, I have a beautiful piece here. I think I can step away. I think at one point you have to. There's a book I read with Brené Brown. It's called The Gift of Imperfections. And I think sometimes we're trying to be so perfect, but what about we turn it around and try to appreciate our imperfections?
You're listening to Creative Leadership with Heart, a podcast that inspires people to take action and be the leader they were born to be. I'm Coach Rico, and I'm known for coaching and training executives, leaders, founders, and high performers at Fortune 100 businesses, startups, and more. I'm here to answer your questions about leadership and personal development while also asking you questions that can unlock your untapped potential. What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Creative Chutzpah. I am your host, Rico Nasol. We have owner of Zadie Creative, Leonard Samuels, and our special guest today, we have Sharon Baluku of Beluku Design. Welcome, Sharon. Thank you for joining us today.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So just a little bit about yourself so the listeners can get adjusted. Tell us a little bit about your creative journey and what was it about creative and design that you decided this was the career for you?
It's actually a long answer and easy in a way for me, because I always liked the creative part of anything, like dance. Growing up, I took a lot of photography classes, enjoyed that, and took dance classes as well. As you're growing up, like arranging your home and enjoy fashion. So that's how I end up in interior design, because love furniture and all that kind of things. So that's kind of how I ended up into the creative. And I was going to do fashion and I got into FIDM. However, at the time, it was only associate degree and was way too expensive. As someone who's an immigrant, my mother was not paying for the school, it was just me. So I did the math. I'm like, that's not logic for me to graduate with an associate degree with so much debt. So that's how I said, okay, let's do interior design. So I did interior design and I started to do that. Even though in the back of my head, I'm like, oh, I like real estate, flipping properties. I'm like, you know what? Interior design, maybe when I'm 50, 60, later on, I can always go into that. So yeah. So I did interior design for quite some time. Like in school when I was studying, I did internship for Michael Smith, and who actually designed for the Obamas. And I think until today, he's still the Obamas. So that was a nice internship that opened really the world to the interior design for me. And then I'm like, oh, but this is still fashion because I deal with textiles, and colors and shapes. So I still had that in fashion sense. And then I was working for another internship. And then once you graduate, I'm like, okay, what happens now? So I would actually already email different designers. And what I did, because I knew I didn't want to end up with any kind of designers. So I Googled the top interior designer in Los Angeles before graduating. And I'm like, okay, I'm just going to email to this, because I knew I had done that internship with Michael Smith. So then I just Googled that and I just kept emailing them, follow up. Eventually, one of them did actually get back, which was Kerry Joss Associates. He's also another very well-known interior designer. And I worked for him for almost 4 years. Yeah, before I said, I think I need to make that leap. And while I was working for him, as we all we get to a point when you're like, okay, now I'm working, but there must be something more. So I was like, it's not enough for me to just work, go to happy hours with friends, and having brunch on Saturday. I'm like, what else can I do? So then I'm like, I love sewing and I love jewelry. So that's how I started Baluku Design. As I was working full time, and I would just come home, kind of put it together, build it, and I said nothing to my co-workers. So one time, actually, Kerry, he's like, "Oh, Sharon, you have an e-commerce." I'm like, "Oh, how did you find it?" I'm not even done yet.
That's the thing. That you can stay under the radar, but people will find you.
Yeah, and I'm like, what? So that's kind of how I did it. Yeah, that's how I started.
Well, really quick, stepping back a little bit, what was the moment? Was there what was the inspiration for you in design? Was there a moment like when you were a kid, a a piece of clothing, a piece of art, a photograph, a movie
Yeah.
that just inspired you to continue down this creative path?
I think growing up on MTV, and I grew up in
Oh,
Sweden, and it's so cold. So we always like watching MTV. My family were big on music, like big Michael Jackson fan, Madonna, because back in the 90s, you were so excited, like, oh, the music video's coming out, and me having the love for dance and all that. And I'm like, oh my God, people can really express themselves. And for me, I think Madonna, because each video, she had like a different style, different hair color or different hairstyle. And I'm like, that's a way you can express yourself. So I think really MTV gave that to me growing up, in Sweden, then Europe itself, like the architecture building, as you walk, you see the castles, even though at the time, as when I was young, I was not appreciating it. I'm like, oh, this is boring, And now that I'm in Los Angeles, I'm like, oh my God, beautiful design over there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the history.
the
And
history.
yeah, I wish MTV, that's a side note. I wish MTV was more like it was back then because there's no music. I don't know if you watch MTV now. There is no music on MTV.
No,
it
I
was what
don't.
it was. But I'm also curious. How did you start to marry your love of interior and architecture and all that into your jewelry?
Oh, into my journey. I think like growing up, like you constantly surrounded by this building. We used to go to museums growing up and you see the different architecture and then studying about architecture. And then me realize the world is formed of shape. It's really shape around you. And I'm a big fan with even like hiking, and when I hike, that's my way to like, okay, go back if I'm like having a bad day or like need some creativity because nature is full of, if you pay attention, there's all shapes around. And I can hike and be like, oh, that leaf could be a necklace. Oh, what about an earring? You know what I mean? And maybe I'll modify it later. So that, but also like architecture, I think the love of that structure, having even like within fashion, like you can dress in an architecture way, like having structure, it's just something I have
Yeah.
always gravitated to.
And what about the materials that you're using? I know that you're in LA, we're in LA, and material is like everything to us. So you talk about the materials that you use and how you got to use those materials.
So at first I had to really whatever I could find, and I knew when I was creating Baluku design that I wanted to really think about the environment, and be careful what materials I use. So I didn't want to like mass produce. So at first I'll maybe go to like, different flea markets or like boutiques, antique shops, and see what I could find. And then now I really try to narrow down into like how can I use the material, like I use wood sometimes in my pieces, and I try to make one of a kind. It's not mass produced because again, like I really do care about the environment and where things come from. Yeah.
Are you modeling a few pieces from your collection
Oh,
right
my
now? Am I
ring.
seeing this just casually?
Yeah. Not on purpose, but yeah, just this
Yeah.
ring. Yeah.
Yeah, for those listening without video, you definitely should check out the video because she has beautiful jewelry. We were fawning over her background because she has a very, very stylized background too.
Yes, very clean. We're all trying to go for the minimum. Well, not you, Rico. You're out of it, Matt. I always feel like there's more personality though. Can you talk about your first like going to one of those pop-up shops and having
Mm.
to lug everything and being like, this is you taking the big step.
Yeah, because my first
That's
year, I'm like,
scary.
okay, I have a website,
Yeah.
zero sales, and I'm like, well, this is not working, So I realized marketing. So then I'm like, okay, what can I do? So I looked into farmers market. I kind
Uh-huh.
of just had to put myself out there, and I found one nearby. And I asked, they're like, yeah. And I'm like, okay, I don't have a table. So I went to Home Depot, got those picnic table. I'm
Yeah.
like, I'm gonna make it work. And so that's how I started. And I remember it was really hard for me to sell in person. It took a
Hmm.
very, very long time. And I felt like I was begging. I don't know if it even makes sense. Like I feel like I was begging people to buy from me. it probably doesn't make sense, but
No,
it
it
was new
makes.
to me.
Mhm.
It was new to me, like to be at the farmers market with my stand and someone passing by, and I'm like, okay, I kind of have to have them come to my table. So I'll say hi, or as soon as they come. It was hard to talk about pricing, and for them to be like, so yeah, that was the challenge for me really in the beginning. But I have to overcome that. Like, no, you made these pieces. Whoever likes them, they're gonna buy because they like them, and it was a
Right.
journey. Yeah.
Yeah, that's something as, even creatives, right? Like anytime we put a piece out, whether it's jewelry, a piece of key art, a trailer, or something like that,
Hmm.
many creatives feel like that's a piece of them. So like that's a part of them that's being judged or torn
Hmm.
apart or whatever. But the way I coach and the way I look at it is you're expressing yours is much different because you're expressing yourself. And if someone's gonna like it, they're gonna love it. But if someone doesn't, that's okay. That's not that's not your target audience. But
Yeah.
that takes a lot of like thick skin, getting used to it. And then even with creatives in terms of like trailers and key art, I also have to tell, like when I was leading like the large team, you're not making something that is a representation of you. You are making something that a client or a showrunner or someone asked you to make. They gave you specific specs, and it's to elicit a specific action. Click this button, watch this movie, do this thing. So it's not a true representation of yourself. So don't feel like it's you're putting yourself out there. You're putting something out there that someone asked you to make. So those are the things that I think as creatives we need to distinguish between the two, right? Because personal
Hmm.
pieces are personal pieces, but work we do for clients, that's based on what they want us to make.
Yeah.
And one thing about um, I'm reading this book called $1 Million Weekend by Noah Kagan,
Okay.
and the way he says for people to get over that thing that you just mentioned, 'cause he said 70% of people don't get what they want because they're just afraid to ask. So what he challenges people to do is next time you go get coffee, do you drink coffee or tea or anything?
Match and tea.
Yeah. Next time you go, ask them for a 30%. Say, can I get 30% off? And don't wait for them to say
Wow,
something.
that's a bold statement.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because it gets you out of your comfort zone. And if they ask you why, you're just like, is it okay if I get 30% off? Like, don't justify it. Don't do
Hmm.
anything. Because what's the worst thing that will happen?
That's
Just
so true.
probably looks, weird looks.
Yeah. Or they'll say no.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, most
Or,
likely gonna say no. Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah. But what's the best thing that can happen?
They'll say yes, and there you got
Yeah,
it.
you get 30% off. So it's not that you need to save the 30% off, but it's more the act of asking.
Hmm.
And especially with Leonard and I talk about all the time with these boxes, we lose that even more courage of asking.
You
And
know
it's
what?
hard to do these things.
Just to talk about that 30% off, is there a softer entrance? Maybe like at a farmer's market, maybe doing like a little bit of the haggling? Because right now we're moving into the summer and
Yeah.
that's the time to work with like artists like yourself and everything. Maybe there's a way to like work in that financially because I'd feel already nervous.
Yeah, look at you. You're already negotiating.
And
Already
saying, if I
negotiating.
have 30% off, I feel bad saying, can I get a stopper for my coffee? But I know like I just need a stopper.
Yeah. So the moral is just to
Yeah.
help
I
get
always ask for the stopper.
yeah, it's
Yes.
always just to get the
Yeah.
mechanics of asking. So
Yes.
so back to
Yeah.
you, Sharon. Like that could be something if it doesn't sound like you have that fear anymore.
No, I do not. But that was in the beginning. I think it's as you any creative, it's good to understand your worth. That's another
Yeah.
thing I really had to like no, you do beautiful art, like, oh, as you guys do movie posters, like you spend so much time, and also the experience, not just from school but your everyday experience, we learn things. And I think really to understand what, so once I understood my worth, like, no, I'm worth of this, and
Hmm.
understanding who's your clientele. At first I wanted to like,
Yeah. Know your
if you get
audience.
discount here, you can get discount here, and I'm like, no, I cannot, like, just like you said, I cannot sell and create for everybody.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this for people listening is almost a less going to turn into slightly a lesson in business, but you're absolutely right, right? If you start competing on price and discounts, it's just a race to the bottom. Now you start to
Ooh, race to the
commoditize.
bottom. Yeah.
Yeah, you're starting to commoditize your work, and your work is not a commodity. Your work are unique, it's unique pieces.
Mhm.
So don't compare your work to the price of a commoditized thing. Like someone could go to Claire's if they want mass produced
Yeah.
plated jewelry. But if they want a unique, one of a kind piece that's handcrafted, they go to you. So you never want to race to the bottom, because then now it's whoever's the cheapest, whoever can do it at scale. You are aiming for quality, premium, one of a kind, things
Yeah,
like that.
exactly.
And Sharon, can you speak to what makes your company, what makes your brand so special? Because I know that yes, you do sell the products, but I know that you go beyond that as well.
Yeah. So I guess what makes Baluku design special is really one, to think about the environment, like the materials that we use and the resources. And then another thing is the reason why I started Baluku design was me had this yearn of like giving back. Because me growing up I was born in Uganda, but I grew up in Sweden. And I have always growing up knowing how lucky and privileged I was, for me to be able to go live in Sweden, then later here in America. So I wanted to give back to girls in Uganda. And that's really the reason why I started my company, is that a portion of the sale, I try to educate girls in Uganda. I have a bigger vision, but for now, that's kind of like what I'm able to do. And as many girls I can at a time. And hopefully my goal is to expand on that. But that's really, yeah, my
Yeah.
reason.
So what types of things? That's amazing, and I want to, even though I'm not a beneficiary, I still want to thank you for that work, because that's amazing work. So what? Two questions, maybe you can answer, but one is, what kind of education or what things do you provide for the girls? And then two, if somebody wants to help, how can they help?
Oh, okay. So the way I educate the girls, at first I remember thinking, do I go through another company? Right? Meaning I donate money to another company and they would educate the girls. But I was also very familiar with embezzlement. As someone who read about, what happens around the world, like in Cambodia, I mean, you name it, not just in Africa. Embezzlement is big up there. And I'm like, I don't want my little portion to be lost. So
Mm,
then I would, because I was born in Uganda, I know people in Uganda. So I would find a child, ask someone who knows someone who needs help. And if that do, so basically, and also I remember thinking, I also know them, sometimes with things can happen, the desperation of like, okay, you send the money to the family and something happens, now they have to use that money for something else. It also, I didn't want that to happen. So then I'm like, okay, let me know which school they're going to and give me the information to the school. So I will send the money directly to the school. And all they have to do is to send a child to the school, pretty much. Like that's
mm,
how I feel like as a small business, I could go around it without
mhm.
losing or like, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's not to get super political, but I mean, that's what people talk about, like the Red Cross here all the time, right? They get like, $100 million in donations, but like 80% of that goes to the salaries of Red Cross, right? So
Yeah.
how much actually, that, don't quote me on that percentage, but
Oh, it's happening.
yeah, but that's
Yeah,
the,
Louise.
and I love that you do that. My parents do the same thing in the Philippines. Like they work directly with scholars and schools
Yeah.
instead of going through foundations,
Yeah.
because to your point, foundations have employees, and then those employees need to get paid. So then a lot of the donations end up going towards those employees.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Exactly.
and then so the second part, like if somebody wanted to help, one, they could absolutely buy from you for sure, and
Yeah.
we hope you do. But if there's other ways, can they also help in other ways?
Right now, it's really through buying from me, and I'm trying to figure out how to create like a link where they would donate the money and then they go. Because I have other friends that do that. They have their own nonprofit. I do not have a nonprofit yet. Therefore, it goes through the product. So that would be the only way I can think of right now. Yeah.
Yeah, and we'll have you back once you have your 503c, I think it is.
Yes.
Oh, look
Yeah.
at this guy. Oh, this
I
guy.
know he knows it. Yeah.
Each one the direction he is on
It's
the
something I'm
screen.
thinking about. Yeah.
Yeah. So I want to go back to you and your journey a little bit. What would you say was the biggest struggle for you as a creative? And it could have been in school, could have been your business, but what was the thing that was the most challenging for you? Or was it like, I don't think it was, or was it clear sailing the whole way?
Yeah. Like in as in school or after as I'm running the business?
Both.
Okay. In school, the most challenging for me was as someone creative, like certain classes are just my attention, it just didn't work, but I had to make it work. For example, science or like math, I wanted to do all the creative classes, the dance, the photography, painting, music. I just excelled in those because I really enjoyed it. So I think my challenge was like in school to pay attention. But now I have learned to like really pay attention through my daily routines, like because you're younger, like, oh, I don't want to do this, therefore you're not gonna try as hard.
Hmm.
But as you get older, it's like, yeah, there's a lot of things that we don't like to do in the, sometimes, but you have to do them. So yeah, so that was the most challenge. And for the business, the most challenging and actually still today is marketing as a small business, like how do you scale? And especially when you meet, having Baluku design, I have always been a full-time interior designer. Like I've worked full-time trying to like, scale my business and the marketing. So that has been the most challenge for me. Yeah.
Yeah, how do you? I'm always curious of like how you push past that fear of starting your company, because I know that
Yeah.
that you have so many things already going on, and then you just it started one way as it blossomed into what it is now. But I think also people forget is that when you have your company like 5, 10, 15, whatever years later, it didn't
Yeah.
just happen overnight.
Oh no.
Was there a moment where you're just like, I'm getting the business license, I'm getting this, I'm getting that. Like I'm just gonna
Mhm.
just pivot, because I know like that's also the theme of our conversation today is pivoting. What was that moment where you just said like it's happening today? I cannot wait anymore.
I got my license, I remember, in 2013.
Oh wow.
Without having the vision, I just knew. Actually, I
Yeah.
remember getting the domain. I just knew I was going to do something. So I'm like, okay, let's
Yeah.
get the domain.
Yeah.
Baluku design, so no one can take it. And then getting the business license, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna figure out. And I got that, and it sat there, and I'm like, because I just didn't know what I wanted to do, but I wanted to like. That was a way to make myself to like, no, get over your fears. Now you have this. Now you have to do this, kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's how I started. And always going back to my big why, and my purpose, like my reasons, like why do I want to do this? It's something I never wanted to work for someone forever. And there's nothing wrong with it. I have done it.
Yeah.
Always wanted to do something of my own.
Yeah.
And having being raised with a single mom, seeing her work and lose the job and then another job, and or like she works putting so many hours,
Yeah.
but still like paycheck to paycheck, in a way it's like I don't want that for me, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
Yeah. Well, you're in LA, and LA is a very
Yeah,
paycheck, no
especially Los
matter how
Angeles.
much you make.
Yeah, it's in Los Angeles. And also like then I started to read these books like Jim Rohn, and when he said like work hard on yourself then you do on your job, I'm like so that's when I kept saying that to myself. He's saying it, work hard on yourself than you do on your job. It
Yeah.
doesn't mean I'm not gonna show up and do my 100% at the job that I'm working at, but I have to balance, even though I'm tired, to go home and put some hours into myself. That's what I learned, kind of like do something little by little.
Yeah. And as a woman of color, how important is diversity in your profession? We'll just stick to this one. I know you have a
Yeah.
lot of you're a jack of all trades, but yeah.
It's very important. I think so. Actually, I believe so. It's very, very important because you're not just representing the people of like African American or African, but even Latinas, Latinos, people from the Philippines, anyone who's like minority, I feel like, and women. So I think it's very, very important. And as an interior designer, I didn't see a lot of people that look like me, and I would go shop and I'm like, and I always wondered, why is that? Like, why is that? And I get it sometimes because then I will have friends and they're like doctors, lawyers, because I get it. They either came here from Uganda or their parents for safety become a doctor, be a lawyer, be a nurse. So many that I know that are nurses. And my mom, she used to be like, why don't you be a nurse? And I'm like, oh my God. I respect them. I respect nurses, but I cannot, and I think, yeah, it's very important. And I did it for me, my nieces and nephews, actually, them to know that even if you have your fears, just try, go for it, because you're never gonna fail, really. Once you do it, you don't fail. You just learn how to do things differently or
Yeah,
better, you know.
that's a good
Yeah.
lesson.
Yeah.
I
I
love
think
that.
creating is like you not starting at all.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yep. Action, messy action is what I used to say to folks. But I want to bring in another quote. But I usually say messy action is better than no action. So good on you for, like, even if you didn't know in 2013, you're just like, I'm going to do it because someday I'm going to build something. And like, good on you for doing that. And also the quote I wanted to bring up was actually something that Oprah said. Oprah said, um, failure is only the world telling you to do something different.
Mm.
So like for that, like if, and it's not to quit, it's just try something new, try a different way to
Yeah.
do it. Right. And
Yes.
I only think you fail when you stop trying,
Hmm.
because eventually if you keep trying, you'll make it work. But once you stop, that's when it's a failure.
Yeah. And I think sometimes once people start to try and they have done something, it's okay to be like, wait, this is not working. I need to maybe take another direction, like pivot. But I think people don't do that because they think people are gonna think they failed because they did not stay on that track. And I think it has to be really like what feels like, like intuition, like, okay, does this feel like I need to pivot or make a turn? I think that's okay too. And that's not fading.
Yeah, absolutely. And what does it matter if you had to pivot? Like, what does it matter what other people think? This is
Yeah.
your future, right? You get one life, one chance at
yeah.
like
The pivot
being
is
happy.
hard because we're stuck in this like this lane. We have to live this like status quo, and they say just do this. But as we've all of the three of us have already experienced, like you just want to try and push to something else because there's more for you. And
Hmm.
there's nothing wrong with being a lifer in any particular
Yeah.
profession. It's just that sometimes I think it's important to have some other personal outlet. You
Yeah.
know.
It's the old adage, right? Do you live to work or work to live?
Oh yeah,
Right? So if you're living to work and that's what you choose,
yeah,
then great. Like you 80-hour weeks are probably the weeks you love, right? Like you love just being at work and doing things and producing stuff.
Yeah.
The other half of the population wants to work so they can live, so they can experience things, right? So I don't necessarily ascribe by like work-life balance is a necessity. I ascribe by do what you love. And if you
Mm.
do what you love, you'll make time for it and you'll make time for everything else. So if you love working, by all means do that. If you love experiencing things, by all means work so you can experience things. If you want to spend time with family, by all means do that.
Mhm.
And that to me is more a better definition of work-life balance than saying 8 hours at work, 8 hours at home every single day.
Yeah.
and Sharon, because you have done so much traveling, how has it crafted who you are?
Um, I think a lot, because like they say, you find who you are really through traveling sometimes, because when you travel, you remove yourself from your comfort zone, and then now you're traveling either to places you've never been to. As back in 2018, yes, I worked for this company, so I was working back and forth from China, and I had never been to China, and I went to different parts of China, don't know the language, and I got the phone where I can be like, Google translating was the best at the time. But yeah, I learned so much, because you exposed to different cultures and customs and the way people do things, food, the way fashion, even like architecture wise, design wise, when you pay attention to how things grows, or even like the nature over there versus here, like what kind of trees they grow, like what kind of, plants they have. So that, and then going to Uganda, because I hadn't been there since I was, oh my God, like since I moved. And then I went back for the first time in 2019. And I was so excited. I'm like, yes, I'm going to remember everything, and I got and couldn't remember nothing. There was nothing. I'm like, really? Not even this, like nothing. I feel like a tourist, and that just changed me, and really taught me how much the privilege, and also how much people actually over there have and how rich they are in a way, because people often in the Western think, oh, people in Africa, oh, Africa, poor Africans, they're so rich. Like, how many people in America own land? Almost a lot of people in Africa own land. Like, you have land, massive land. And not just that, like the joy of the children, even if they have less, they don't have the tablets, they don't have, all this equipment, and but yet they're so happy, And then you see kids in the Western, like nowadays, kids give a gift, like, what do you want? A toy? They're like, I want an iPhone 16. I'm like my nephew, I'm like, you ate. you know I'm thinking I'll get you like a toy, like, no, iPhone 16, like
The
the latest.
Spider-Man.
Otherwise they're not happy, so it changes. You see things in different perspective, really, when you travel, I think.
And have you felt like the traveling has, uh, impacted the way that you do your jewelry? Have they been taking on an evolution since you've been doing these trips?
Yeah, and I try to incorporate, like, how can I bring more the African aesthetic, also yet my personal, like the ring I'm wearing, it's from Botswana. The stone, it's a Botswana stone, so it's kind of like things like that, and really embracing also like my roots, like my African side, like, yet with my personal style, because not every person from Africa look the same, just like not every person in America look the same. Like, you have your own sense of style. So yeah, I try to incorporate that.
So I want to ask you a little bit about the mission and purpose of your design business. So
Mhm.
what is it, if someone were to ask you, like, what do you want to get out of your, and not personally, like, you want to have your own business and those things, but what is the mission for um your design, for Beluku design?
Mhm. My mission is really to be able to give back, and provide and give, share resources, the ones I have been had the privilege to experience and be given. And so that's really I always, like, one of my why. When I don't feel like, I'm like, no, like, okay, if you really want to give back in that kind of magnitude, you have to keep pushing. You know what I mean? So that's kind of like my always one of my big why, and like think
Mhm.
like, okay, why can you have this and another can't, as we all know, not just in Africa but around the world, girls tend to be the ones that don't go to school because either the family had to pick, and usually it's the boys, like the boy goes and the girls stay and clean, etc. And I'm like, no, and any child that grows not going to school and you don't know the basic math, read, writing, it's gonna be really tough for you. You know what I mean? But even if you're street smart and you know basic math, writing, and reading, I believe that girl will excel because she will find something she's gonna make, and maybe now she can go to a market and sell that little produce that she's making, or whatever it is, which will take her out of poverty, which will make her not to go into sex trafficking. I mean, we can really expand on this, but I'm not going to here. You know what I mean? So that's kind of like my, like, big why. And knowing I'm not able to help every single, girls, but like even if I can help one, I believe in the ripple effect. You
Mhm.
just help one person. It's kind of like you leave your house and you just smile to that person. You don't know how they woke up, but by you smiling and say hi, they're gonna do that to the next person, and maybe that next person is the one that needed it the most, because maybe they were thinking of like, today's it, I cannot do it, but then someone says hello, how are you, and it just changes everything for them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
um that I love that perspective. um and I was going to ask you, for some of those girls, or even maybe yourself or people who are listening to this, what advice would you give to your younger self, or some of these girls that you are helping provide an education for, if they wanted to get into design, into the creative field, or maybe even start their own business?
Yeah. My advice would be not to be too hard on yourself and judge yourself. because what people perceive who you to be. Because I think sometimes we think we know who we are, but what people really are telling us who we are. And I think just curiosity, really, that's the biggest one, I would say, to anyone, anywhere. Just be curious and listen to your intuition. Like, don't be afraid of failing. There's no such thing as perfect, to be honest, and people who strive to be perfect in the way to be really perfect, they just are decisive. They cannot say, I have a beautiful piece here. I think I can step away. I think at one point you have to. There's a book I read with Brené Brown. It's called The Gift of Imperfections. And I think sometimes we're trying to be so perfect, but what about we turn it around and try to appreciate our imperfections, because a lot of creative people, that's when you shine. Whenever you're trying to be too like controlling the pieces that you're working on and you're not in the flow, you're trying to be perfect. But where does perfect come from? I feel like perfect come from the society. So you're trying to design something because, oh, this is what they're gonna like, versus let me be in the flow. And whatever imperfection it is, just look at it. And a lot of times that's the perfect piece, actually. Even painters, musicians.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
that
oh, go ahead.
oh yeah, sorry. I was gonna say that the imperfections are the signs of vulnerability, the signs of
Yeah.
authenticity, right? And the thing, like I used to struggle with perfectionism before too. And for me, all it was a built-in excuse if somebody
Mhm.
didn't like what I did.
Yeah.
Because if they didn't like what I did, I would know like, oh, well, it wasn't my best because it wasn't perfect. And I would
Mm.
just hide behind that. So like, oh, I'm a
Mhm.
perfectionist and never nothing is ever perfect. So I
Yeah.
could hide behind that. But really it was just because I was afraid that people would think I wasn't good enough.
Yeah.
So I got over that. And I love that you brought up the Brene Brown book. And I love that perspective you bring of loving the imperfections and knowing that that brings I think that's what people connect to because humans are imperfect. And so
Yeah.
when you
Be
connect to the
authentic.
piece, yeah,
Mhm.
it's like it's those imperfections that we connect with. Sorry, Leonard, you were going to say something.
No, no, it's fine. I have to unfortunately bring you down for a second, Sharon. For the people that are saying she's too positive, she's too, everything
Oh,
is making me feel great. What do you do when you are having a bad day? How do you get through a bad day yourself?
yeah. I'm too positive. I'm not. um, no, like I think we all have those days,
Yeah.
like really, it's part of life. Life, I have learned, is not whatever pink and candy. Like it's really, if you're not having any hardship, I feel like you're not growing, you're not expanding,
Yeah, those growing
because that
pains.
means you're just saying, you're not making this, like, so what I do on my hard time is really, like I said previously, I love hiking. I love the nature. Sometimes I can just do solo hikes, and I come back and I'm like, oh, like people like go to church. I'm like, God is everywhere. When I go, when I go like hiking, like just the nature feeds my soul and the mountains. So that's one thing. Another thing is like put on your favorite music and just dance to that music. That's another way I do it. But there's so many ways. I journal. Sometimes I
Oh,
journal.
that's good.
That's something because it did like, just write down your thoughts, and really understand that someone once told me it's a wave. It's like, when you surf, that's how emotions are like waves. You go up and down. You just have to stay on the course. And tomorrow they might go down, but you pick yourself up. It's not always easy. And always have someone you can rely on when you feel like it's really deep, deep, deep. And you feel like you don't even know where to pick yourself and what to do next. Like try to find that person. Pick up a book. I read a lot. Books really have, for me, helped me. Yeah.
So I know we're coming up at time, but I want to ask you because you are a woman of many talents. So you have your design company, you're a real estate agent, and you do some other things. Plus nature reading. How do you balance it all? Like, how do you do it? And what advice would you give to people who are trying to find this balance and not like work-life balance we talked about before, but you just have so many things going on. So how
Yeah.
do you find the time for it all?
So for me is having structure, schedule and routine, like daily routine. So yeah, I'm doing my jewelry. I know when I'm producing the new product. and having a structure, things of coming in. Okay, I'm shipping on this day. In my real estate, that's something now I do full time. That's why I had to let go of my interior design. I recently resigned from that job because I'm like, now I want to focus on my real estate and the jewelry. So balance, like, yeah, I would say structure, like have structure, have that daily routine that works for you. And no is your best friend. Like saying no. Like I had to learn to say no to things. Sometimes you have to say no to friends. You have to say no to people. It doesn't mean you don't love them. It just means your intention is to focus on your, company or, yeah, health, mental health.
Yeah. And for those who are, because this is about pivoting and also getting over fears of failure, for those that are maybe afraid to say no, which is a muscle you definitely should build,
Oh yeah.
not yet works also. So if you
Mhm.
can't say no, then say not yet,
Yeah.
because that's another way, like, okay, well, I can't do it for you. That doesn't mean you're never going to do it for them. Just means now's not the time.
Yeah.
Um,
I
and
agree.
I have one more fun question for you if you're okay with it. It's something that we ask everybody. So, what is one thing that people don't know about you that they would be shocked to find out?
I don't know. I guess I love plants, but I think
Oh,
like I to a point where I had to tell myself to stop buying them. I literally have excuses. It said, take me home. I love plants so
there's a lot
much.
of plant lovers out here. They're
Yeah,
gonna hear
I
this and be like,
am.
yes, they do talk.
They do, yeah. So I think that I speak three languages. And that's something I don't always tell people when I first meet them, but I speak more than two languages. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, I wish the US would adopt more of that, because
Yeah.
it's not common for someone in the US to speak more than one, maybe two.
Hmm.
Um, but when I would travel to like Europe or like Africa or like Brazil, like they speak like 4 or 5 languages. I'm
Yeah.
like, how do you, I can speak one. How do you speak five? Yeah, that's
The brain
impressive.
can adapt. Yeah.
Yeah, you speak 3 languages. Which 3?
I speak Luganda, which is the African, and Swedish and English.
Got
And
it.
I did study Spanish, but when I moved here from Sweden, I didn't practice. So I think I need to travel somewhere and just like speak Spanish again.
It's still buffering.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like sometimes I'm like, okay, what do you call that app? Duolingo.
Duolingo, yeah.
Sometimes I'm like, I need to pick that up to practice my Spanish. Yeah.
Yeah, make sure you friend me on there. I'm currently on like a 220-day streak. For
Oh,
anyone
wow.
who's listening, you can find me on Duolingo on
Okay.
my Spanish streak.
Maybe that's a
Not,
reason to jump back on.
yeah. Um, cool, Leonard. Any final questions for Sharon?
No, what do you got going on? Because I know we got some shows like Unique LA is coming back,
Oh,
and
wait, how can people find you?
yeah.
Yeah, so people can find me Baluku Design, Instagram pretty much. That's where I am mainly. And I have for any real estate, it's just Sharon Baluku, my name. Yeah. And I'm on Threads. It's something I'm testing it out. So Baluku Design.
Are
Nice.
you
And
doing
then
Yeah.
any other shows coming up for the summer?
I'm not doing any shows yet, unless there's one I want to but I'm taking a break from shows and really want to focus on marketing my website and
Mhm.
the foot traffic. Yeah.
Perfect.
nice.
Well, it sounds like it takes a lot of chutzpah to be creative. So
It
thank you so
does.
much.
Thank you guys. Thank you for your time and for
Yeah.
having me.
No, absolutely. You've been great. Thank you for joining us. Again, thank you all for listening. It's been another episode of Creative Hood Spa. Thank you, Sharon. Thank you, Leonard. Rico signing off. We will see you in the next one. Thanks for listening to this episode of Creative Leadership with Heart. If you enjoyed the show, please like and subscribe. If you're ready to make huge, lasting change in your life, then what are you waiting for? What will your life look like if you took action today? What would it look like if you didn't? If you're serious and you're ready, book your free strategy session today and let's make your future a reality.